Hello, I'm Luke, and welcome to another episode of the Vision to Victory podcast, where we discuss practical ways to turn your dreams into reality. Last week, we started on the discussion of navigating transition, navigating the seasons of life. We discussed how one of the only certainties in life is change. And we talked about some of the different seasons, whether it be early stage, kind of childhood, if you will, young adult, midlife, and beyond, right? Kind of golden years, if you will. And we talked about how what serves us in one season often doesn't serve us in the next. Put another way, what we know to do or how we know to do it is not the same things that we will need to know or need to know how to do for the next season, or perhaps the season you're entering into or we are entering into. Think of it like this. I want to tee this up today with, think of changing jobs. In fact, think of getting a promotion. Say you're working a job that you do very well and you get a promotion. Maybe you're going from being, what's called an individual contributor, which is exactly what it sounds like. You have a job with tasks and roles, and you're getting promoted to some sort of leadership, some sort of manager where you will have people under you. The way that you did your first job is not the way that you need to do your second job. Now, there, of course, are going to be skills and things that you learned from the job you're coming from that will be relevant in the job you're going to. And then there's a lot that won't. And if you treat your new job like your old job, if you were to do it exactly the same way that you were doing your other job, you would get fired because the responsibilities are not the same. And if you are pursuing the result that was required in your old job, that will not be the result that's required in the new job. Right? This is kind of intuitive, but it's a really good illustration of life. And while nobody is going to hopefully fire you from your own life per se, the same thing applies in that in one season, we do things a certain way, and there are things to gain and things to learn and things to pursue in each season of life. But if you want a recipe for depression, stress, lack of purpose, lack of meaning, all of that, just try and do your next season the way you did your previous season. Because the truth of the matter is that our priorities change, and this happens oftentimes subconsciously. And we get this feeling, one of the biggest cliches on this topic is midlife crisis. We get, and it could be honestly quarter life crisis, midlife crisis, late life crisis. It could be any of those. The truth is it's a crisis of I don't know who I am and what my life is about, because I'm in a place where what I thought was important or the things that I took pride in no longer hold the same value or weight for any number of reasons. This is completely natural. The problem that we often run into is we don't know what to do with it. And so we just try to double down on doing things the way we've always done, maybe just putting more energy into them. And this is a losing strategy. So again, the question here is, how do we navigate transition? How do we navigate going from one season to the next in a way that doesn't cause us to spiral downward, or it doesn't cause, a crisis, if you will, a real crisis where you make bad decisions and, do things that can, point your life in a direction that you don't want to go simply because you don't understand what's happening. And so you chase some sort of pleasure or fulfillment, which will ultimately leave you wanting. It's not going to solve the issue of what is this season supposed to look like in my own life. So as I've spent time on this topic, just thinking about it and even assessing it in my own life, the topic of transition and seasons, I just continue to realize that this is there's so much depth to this topic. And so I'm going to continue to do it in a few sections. So, in last week, we summarized some of the primary life seasons. And, I'm very intentional on this channel to take important things and make them practical. Today, I actually want to take a little bit of a different approach, and we'll get to a lot of the practical pieces next week. So that'll be part 3. This will be part 2 of navigating transition. But I think there's some really important questions and deep work that we need to do to really lay the foundation here. So I'm going to spend a little less time on the practical stuff today, and I want to ask you some questions, and I hope you'll spend some time with these questions, because they will set up how you do transit. They will transition. They will set up how you do seasons of life. They will set up how you perceive yourself in relation to the rest of the world and the life that you're in and the season that you're in. And so, with that, I want to ask some challenging questions, and I hope you lean in. But I'm going to start by saying this: you are going to die. I don't mean this in any morbid way, of course, but this is a reality for every single one of us. Of course, but we often ignore it in how we do our lives. We act like it's some distant thing or never going to happen. Now, obviously, if someone were to ask you, are you going to die? You would, of course, say yes. But as far as how you conduct yourself and how you live your life, we so often, have our head in the sand, so to speak. But the truth is, with 100% certainty, your life here on earth will end. And it will be sooner than you think. In fact, let's just be real about it. None of us know. And one of the cultural things or trends to do with this reality is to, YOLO, you only live once, seize the moment, do what feels good, which is a terrible, very surface level interpretation of this reality. And I'll tell you why, and then we're going to get to the challenging questions. So you're going to die. I'm going to die. We're all going to die. It's going to come sooner than we think. It could be tomorrow, could be, statistically speaking, somewhere between 70s and 80s is the most probable. That's the reality. But there's no guarantee that any of us will get there. My dad passed away from cancer at the age of 63. And outside of that, he was still young and healthy, And so nothing is guaranteed as far as the time we have here. And we are all going to reach the end of it. So my question for you is, what do you think happens at the end of your life? When your time here on earth comes to an end, is that it? Do you believe that there's a life after this one? And again, I know these are going to be deep questions, and sometimes deep can be uncomfortable and we can blow them off because they're uncomfortable. We'll make some other excuse, but really it's just because it makes us feel uncomfortable. So I hope you'll sit with me for a second here, because it matters. You're going to die. What do you think happens? And if the answer is, I don't know, which is so common, then maybe you could even say it this way. If you don't know, which is fair, none of us had ever been there before, so to speak. What do you believe? What do you believe will happen at the end of your life? And let me make it just a little less weighty for a second and put it this way. Do you believe that the things that you do while you're here on earth echo after you die? And what I mean by that is, are there ripple effects on the other side of this life in some way, shape, or form? I realize that sounds abstract, but I think it's a worthwhile question, because the reason we have to think about this if we want to get the most out of our lives is what we think about the end of our time here and what we think about happens at the end of our time here and beyond directly impacts how we live our lives here. For instance, if you believe that this is all there is, we've got, call it our 75, 80 years here on earth, and at the end of it, we go in the dirt, that's it. If you believe that, then you might be tempted to just pursue pleasure, because who cares? Who cares? In 100, 200 years, who cares? Who cares? And maybe maybe you believe that, but you're a little bit more mature and maybe would say, okay, it doesn't really matter, but I still do care about the experience of my kids and maybe their kids. So I want to do some things so that the people after me have a better 75 to 80 years. But outside of that, it doesn't really matter. And while that's better than the first, it's still wildly incomplete. And so I would encourage you to, if you are uncertain of what you believe at the end of your life, and maybe, again, if you're a young person, you probably don't spend much time thinking about this. That would be, would certainly have been the case for me, for, much of my, kind of first quarter of life, if you will, even a little past that. And, but then life kind of hits you in the face. It has a way of doing that. And then you realize what a reality death really is. And you maybe start to question what's the point or what is the purpose here. And I think it's so important that we do not shy away from this. So again, the question to you is, what do you think happens when you reach the end of your life and you leave this earth? What happens? Because it matters. It matters how you do your life today. So again, let me give you kind of high level my own beliefs and how it impacts my actions today. So I believe that there is a God, that we were all created for a purpose, and that at the end of this life, there is an eternity after it. And that what we believe and how we conduct ourselves not only echoes in the generations here on earth, but echoes in the life following this one. Maybe you believe the same or something similar. Maybe you think that sounds crazy. And if that's the case, then I would challenge you to say, what do you believe, and substantiate it? Substantiate it for me, meaning explain to me how you came to the conclusions that you've come to. Because as we all have to do, I've spent a lot of time challenging my own beliefs and challenging maybe things that have been handed to me or things that other people have said. And I have come to the conclusion based on what I believe to be the relevant evidence, if you will, that there is a life after this one and that what we do here matters. And so that changes how I view seasons. It changes how I view transition. And because if I'm just going to live for myself, or even again, maybe my family, but at the end of the day, we're all going to die and there's nothing after this, then what does it really matter? What does it really matter how we spend our lives, how we do seasons and all of that? Let me make a quick argument for this because I think it might help process some of this as you're thinking about it. And a few weeks ago, I talked about, how I use the car analogy. I recently bought a new car and how, it's fun getting new stuff, but then it so quickly just becomes your car, right? I mean, and the older you get, the quicker that happens, right? So it's like, when I was 20, I got a new car. It seemed maybe really cool or awesome for a year or two. I get a new car today and it's cool for a week, So, and then it's kind of like, all right, on to the next thing. And the reality is that there's evidence all around us that there is no arrival here on earth. And what I mean by that is there's no amount of money. There's no amount of anything here where anybody will ever feel like I've arrived. I've made it. I have everything I need. I'm completely happy, content, full of purpose, meaning, fulfillment. It doesn't ever happen. And I think that itself is indication that there's more going on. There's more to the story than simply we just kind of go through our day to day, hopefully get a good job, make some money, have a family maybe, whatever the case. I think there's more to the story. And I could spend a lot of time on kind of building the case for what's really going on in life and why we're here. And maybe I'll do that at another time. But I think if you look with the intent to learn something new, not to reinforce some idea or belief that you already have, but if you assess your life or then the lives of people around you, you will find that there's evidence. It becomes, in my opinion, self-evident, meaning like it requires no additional explanation that there's more than just what happens here on earth. And again, I know this is kind of a deep topic, and we're talking about seasons of life, right? And how do you navigate transition? How do you go from young adult to midlife to kind of golden years? How do you do all those seasons well? How do you find purpose in each of them? And again, I think just answering the question of where is our life going and what does it mean when we die? What happens after? I think is so critical. I mean, I truly believe it is the foundation of why we do or how we do what we do, whether we realize it or not. And again, we so often stray away from these types of conversations or even thinking about it with ourselves and, kind of in our own minds, because let's say you are living your life in such a way that's kind of just go with the flow, not really doing anything meaningful or purposeful, just kind of taking each day as it comes. If you ask yourself this question and you arrive at the conclusion that you believe that there's a life after this one, and you realize that the way that you're doing your life today doesn't line up with your belief. In other words, if you believe that what we do here matters and has really long-term impact beyond this life, then you would do it a certain way. You would do it a certain way, and that's not the way you're doing it now. In other words, sometimes we stray away from uncomfortable topics because if we were honest about them, they would require action on our parts. And this is certainly one of those. But we talk about this often. We don't choose easy. We don't choose easy. We choose to do the work so that we can have the life that we want and that we're created for. So, again, next week we'll talk more. We'll kind of get back on track, if you will, on the practical parts of navigating transition. But I hope that you'll take some time to reflect on the reality that you are going to die. Your life is going to end. It will be sooner than you think. And with that as the backdrop, what would you like the next season of your life to look like? Knowing that your time here is so limited, I know this is cliche. People use this for all sorts of different reasons. Again, as we talked about with culture and live for the moment, all that stuff. But if you believe that there's more than just this life, then what would that mean for the next season, or the season that you're in, or the season that you're going into? What would it mean? How can you extract purpose out of that season? Again, next week, we'll talk more about the practical pieces here. We'll talk more about, okay, so if we believe that there's meaning, and we believe that in how we do this season affects much more than just the current moment, then how would we approach it, and how would we approach it differently? A little bit of a change of pace this week, and we'll again dig into the practical stuff a little more, and how do we actually take these kind of deep, heady, weighty thoughts and apply them in our life, and find meaning and purpose in each season. Because I promise you, if you want a positive note here, in every season of life, you can find that it's more fulfilling than the last. I promise you. And look, if maybe you're ahead of me in life, or maybe you're behind me in age, and you might say, well, Luke, maybe you don't know this or you don't know that. I promise you, I have done a lot of. I spent a lot of time on this, and a lot of time pondering this in my own life, and reading from people that are much further down the road than me, and understanding perspectives of people coming up behind me. And I promise you that you can find meaning, contentment, joy, fulfillment in the season you're in, even if it's challenging, sometimes especially if it's challenging. And if you're in transition, which is uncomfortable, and it's supposed to be uncomfortable, you can find peace, joy, purpose, and contentment in that as well, even more than the last. So I hope you'll hang with me on this one. I hope this was insightful, or maybe inspires you to ask some hard questions. And then we'll have a little more fun next week, talk about some of the things that we can do to really get the most out of each season that we're in. Thanks. Have a good day.